Benita Messiadis, who is a former Football Federation Australia executive turned whistleblower, and she joins us now from Sydney. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Firstly, if I could take you to some breaking news we've just received. Agence France Presse, the French news agency, has just tweeted that an official from FIFA has announced that a presidential election will be held on February 26. That's some time away. Is this a surprise to you?
No. Not at all. Sepp Blatter will do all he can to hang on for as long as he can. And, you know, what's amazing is that you have in that executive committee room 25 people, because one of them couldn't turn up because they were too worried about the Swiss authorities grabbing them while they were there. But you have 25 people who you think would have a bit of guts and who would actually stand more for the game rather than their position in the game and say two things. One, Sepp, this needs to happen much quicker, and two, we want independent reform of FIFA, not this circling of wagons that we're currently getting.
And just on that possible presidential election as well, we had Sepp Blatter announce that he would be stepping down after he was re-elected in June. Why is he remaining in place? Didn't you expect that he would go sooner?
No, this is a man who's been in FIFA for 40 years. He started there in 1975. He's been president for 17 years. Before that, he was CEO for 17 years. He's not a person who wants to go. He's not a person who's used to external scrutiny. He's not a person, and it's not just him, but it's FIFA. They do not understand that they are accountable to anyone. In fact, they haven't been accountable to anyone, and that's the problem. That's why we're now here, or while they're at the point where they've had 14 arrests from the US, they've got 81 cases of wire fraud and money laundering being investigated in Switzerland. There will be more arrests from the US. That's why we're at this point, because it has a culture that is terribly flawed, that is terribly corrupt, and a person at the top of it who doesn't accept that he's got anything to do with it or that he has any responsibility for it.
I'd like to ask you about those arrests in a moment, but also tonight the BBC has reported that Michel Platini, the head of UEFA, has been tipped to stand against Sepp Blatter. Apparently he has most of World Football Federation's support. What do you make of Mr Platini? Is he a good candidate to stand against, to stand for the presidency?
Yeah, Michel Platini was a wonderful, wonderful footballer. But he's been head of UEFA for 13 years. He's been on the executive committee for 13 years. Now, someone who's been on that executive committee and has seen all this go on around them for 13 years and who hasn't raised a question is as much a person that needs to be cast aside as Sepp Blatter or any of the other cronies that are in Zurich. The only thing that will reform FIFA, the only thing in which we can have some trust and some confidence is to have independent reform led by an eminent person.
Yeah. Do you expect that that structure, an independent reform of the organisation, will be announced by Sepp Blatter tonight?
I'd be surprised that it is, because I don't think that FIFA would want anything where they'd have someone external coming in. And in fact, if they do, time after time has proven that it never actually happens. I mean, let's remember, 4 years ago, he said he wanted a good governance committee comprising Johan Cruyff, Placido Domingo and Henry Kissinger. Putting aside the absurdity of that committee, he hadn't actually asked them first before he announced it. Then he brought in some genuine experts like Professor Mark Pearce and others, and they ended up all leaving, not literally but metaphorically, in tears, because it's an organisation that doesn't really want to reform itself in the way it needs to be reformed. To introduce democracy, to introduce transparency, to introduce accountability. So anything that they're going to announce tonight is, as I said earlier, it's about circling the wagons. It's about shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, and it is not going to end up with an organisation where the billions of fans and the millions of players can have some trust and some confidence and have an organisation that they deserve to have running this fantastic world sport.
You've been behind this campaign for an independent body to investigate FIFA, and now Coca-Cola, one of FIFA's major sponsors, has put its weight behind this campaign as well. Can you tell us a bit about it and a bit of how you see this commission unfolding?
Well, I think first of all, we must got to welcome the support of Coca-Cola for an independent FIFA Reform Commission, but they're not the only ones. The European Parliament announced last week that they support it. The UK Parliament has said that they are looking at an inquiry into FIFA. The US Senate is looking at FIFA as well. How it would work is that we would have an eminent person. Kofi Annan has been suggested as someone in Zurich today, by some of my colleagues in Zurich today, someone of that calibre who would come in and have a mandate. It would be a time-limited administration and have a mandate to review, to develop and then implement a new constitution, new statutes, a new electoral system, and conduct fresh elections. And that would be both from the top down and from the bottom up, because it's not only FIFA and it's not only Sepp Blatter, but it's also the 209 member associations around the world who also need to develop a culture of integrity. And part of what we would be looking for is that each of those 209 football associations be given a time in which they have to also introduce and develop similar reform measures, similar measures of democracy, transparency and accountability into the sport. Because what they do not understand, what they do not get, is that football doesn't belong to them. Football doesn't belong to the people at FIFA, and football doesn't belong to the 209 football associations and the presidents of those 209 football associations who swan around in blue coats at football matches.
You mentioned those dramatic arrests by Swiss authorities of FIFA executives on corruption charges, and we recently heard former FIFA Vice President Geoffrey Webb plead not guilty to racketeering charges. Do you expect we'll see many convictions out of this corruption scandal?
Well, I think anyone who's followed FIFA and been around football for some time would understand that this goes deep and it goes broad. It's something also which the US Attorney Loretta Lynch said when she made announced the initial indictments. So I can only go, those investigations have to take their course, and they will take their course with both the US authorities and the Swiss government. But the US Attorney did say at the time that there will be more, and you can assume that she probably knows what she's talking about.
Now, if these reports are true of the next presidential election being February 26, how do you think that'll be received by football federations but also the public at large? Because after all, these arrests have taken place, and those arrests really brought this whole issue to a head. So how do you think people will react to an election taking place next year as opposed to now?
Well, I think sadly, with the football world, they'll probably just accept it. But this is where there are mechanisms within the FIFA statutes now for those football associations who are reform-minded, who do understand that all of this stuff is bringing the game into disrepute. They could do something. They would be at 40, if 42 of them got together and asked for an urgent FIFA Congress, it could happen, and they could seek independent FIFA reform. But let's put that aside, because that's probably a little bit idealistic for the football world. In terms of what do fans and people think, I think they're tired of it. I mean, we love football, but we absolutely abhor FIFA and the way the game is run. It is embarrassing. And we deserve better. The players who are out there every week, both professional and amateur players, the volunteers, the officials, all the fans who pay their hard-earned money, deserve a sport that is run to the highest levels of probity.
OK, Benita Merciades, we were expecting Sepp Blatter to speak by now, but apparently it's been delayed, so we will keep an eye on it tonight. But in the meantime... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just give you one hint. Sepp Blatter press conferences are always delayed.
Okay. Yes, and we're experiencing that right now. But thank you so much for your time tonight, and we will keep an eye on the issue.
Thanks, Oscar.